Hi guys, so I've been going over watercolor techniques with you. This is my second video on watercolor technique. I'm actually really excited about this one because I get requests for it all across the board from K through 12. All of you ask me how to do this. You could do this with acrylics too, and doing it with acrylics is very different. So I will show you guys that one eventually as well. But for this week, we're just covering watercolor. So basically, what's cool about this is you just kind of let your colors flow with the water and they just sort of mesh together on their own. It is the most awesome thing to watch your pigments just bloom in that water. It's really cool. So the best way to explain this, guys, is to just show you. So I'm gonna go ahead and set up my camera, and I got some nice watercolor paper over here. I've got my brushes ready and my watercolors, of course, and my spill canvas set up. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you find it helpful as well. Okay, so very important, again, make sure you guys have the right paper. Make sure you have the right brushes. You want soft bristles. My brush is already wet over here, so I'm gonna clean this off real quick because I was already painting with it. You know me, I like to use my spill canvas. There we go. Okay, so what's really neat about this is it's kind of like a really slow, controlled chaos. It's like a very meditative splatter painting, even if you want to call it that. So a lot of people, when they start painting a galaxy, they go right for the black. That is the last thing you want to do, guys. Okay, what happens when you use black first is it's going to make all of your other colors murky. It's going to make your water murky. It's going to make your brush murky, and everything's just going to take on that dark, murky hue. We don't want that. We want nice bright colors. So make sure that your palette's nice and clean too. Mine's pretty clean right now. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some water. My water's got a purple tint to it. That's okay, because I'm gonna use purple anyway. And I'm going to just put some on here. And I'm not gonna cover my whole canvas just yet. And I'll show you guys why. This is really neat. So I'm gonna brush some of that water off my brush because I want it a little drier and I want a lot of pigment. So less water in your color, more pigment, which is gonna give me nice vibrant purple. And then I'm just gonna touch this to that color and look how that blooms. Isn't that cool? And this is how you're gonna get that nebula effect. And your darker areas, you just wanna touch your brush right straight to the canvas, all around those colors. Pretty neat, right? All right, so as I'm doing this, I'm gonna start adding multiple colors, okay? And I'm going to give my brush a nice clean here because I don't want this whole thing to be purple. What mixes really well in nebulas are blues and reds, and you're going for almost a pink with the red. And again, my water still has this purple tint to it. That's okay for what I'm doing right now. I'm all right with that. But if you want really crystal clean water, a good trick is to just keep 2 water jars so that one of them you just use to apply to your canvas and the other one you use to clean your brush off. Okay, so now that I got that, I'm gonna brush some water off again, and I'm gonna get a ton of this blue pigment on here. And I'm gonna do the same thing, just gonna lightly touch. Now, you're gonna find that this is very much trial and error, okay? Don't get frustrated. This is something that you wanna experiment with before you think to yourself, oh, I'm gonna go into this making a masterpiece. No, you just wanna slowly ease into it, okay? Get used to the idea, experiment with it. You're gonna find that you'll have different ways that you like to apply your paint that work better for you. And it's gonna make all the difference, okay? So all I'm gonna do is keep applying little spots of paint like this all around my water. And then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna get some more purple because I really like that purple. I like the purple more than the blue. And I'm just touching the edge of the water that I put on here. It's just a puddle. And I'm touching the edge of it. And my colors are just bleeding together. You want to be very careful that you're not just swiping back and forth, okay? You don't want to be doing any of this. That's not what you're going for. You want to create these subtle little pockets of color and definition, and your watercolor is just going to take over all on its own, okay? Let the water paint for you. Okay, now you're probably asking yourself around this point, how am I gonna make stars on this? And this is a really cool trick, and I know I've shown you guys this in class before, at least some of you anyway. And you have to do this while your canvas is wet. If you wait for it to dry, it's gonna take forever. You wanna get yourself some kosher salt, and you want salt, I've got some here. You want stuff that's got a bigger grain to it, okay? So like table salt will kind of work, but this is much better. So I'm just gonna put some over here. You're just gonna take a pinch, and I'm gonna put this close up so you guys can see what this does. And what it should do is just kind of absorb some of that paint. So later on, when I pick this up, it's kind of gonna look like there's some stars in there. And what I can also do, it's also gonna give it that kind of nebula effect that I'm going for. What I can also do later is, if I really want, I could take some white acrylic and splatter some stars on there. But for now, I'm gonna start adding a little red to my palette here. I'd really like to see some other tones. So as you're doing this, you want to be very careful, guys, about the colors that you're mixing, okay? So red and purple and blue all go really nice together. They work. But if I start adding the complementary color of red, which is the opposite on the color wheel, if I started adding green to my red, because I think, hey, green's gonna look really nice on this. It's a nebula, space green, right? It's going to turn my red brown, and I don't want that. That is not what you're trying to achieve, okay? So try to keep in mind all that color theory that we were learning about and how you can apply that to your art as you're working, okay? Now I'm gonna do kind of the opposite effect over here. I'm gonna add water close to my pigment instead of adding pigment close to water. And check out how this just kind of blooms. Now, at this point, if I wanted to add green to this, I could do it over here on this side, kind of away from the red. So I'm actually gonna do that right now. I'm gonna add some greens and some yellows. Now, I wanna talk about something real quick with you guys. I mentioned making sure that there's a lot of pigment on your brush. I want you to take a look at this palette, okay? So this is what I'm going for here. My color is wet, but there's not a puddle in it, okay? So I can get pigment on my brush. This green right here, I just put way too much pigment in there. So I'm gonna water in there. So I'm gonna brush some of that off over here, and you can see the color of that green. And I'm just gonna take a paper towel and dab some of the water out, and look at that. That is how easy it was to fix that, okay? So instead of trying to work with my mistake, I fixed it first, okay? So now that I've got this where I want it, and you can see that I've got enough color that it'll come off my brush. Okay, that is what I'm going for. So I'm gonna start kind of working this in along the side over here. And I think that I went a little too quick with the green, and that I should put some blue in here as a transition color, because if I'm going along the color wheel and I want my colors to just kind of bloom into each other, blue is gonna come in between purple and green. So always keep in mind that color theory, okay guys? I'm not gonna go too crazy with the green. Definitely need that transition. Now remember, if you want a lighter green, you use more water and less paint. If you want a darker green, you use more paint and less water. And you can always darken your green up by mixing it with your blue. If you start mixing it with your red, it's gonna get a little murky, which is great if you're doing shadows, but maybe not so much for what we're trying to achieve here. I'm actually gonna go a little crazy here, and I'm gonna put some yellow and really lighten that green up, okay? So if you really want a different yellow, here's a good way to go. It's all slow and methodical, okay? No shortcuts here. You take your time and just let the paint work for you. I really want to lighten this yellow up over here and just kind of give this a sort of starlight effect. So something I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to dab some of my color up And like I said, this is lifting. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna give it this kind of cloudy effect. There we go. Okay, now you might be thinking to yourself right now, that's really cool and all, and it does have some kind of nebulaness going on, but why, like, it's really light. I really like to give that kind of more of an outer space vibe. So what I'm gonna do is, this is kind of dried up in certain spots, which is great, but if you need to let this dry up a little bit, and I'm gonna take this purple, nice and dark, and I'm just gonna kind of work this in around my edges and darken up my outer space a little bit, just a little. And this is because I am gonna go in with some black in a second, and I'm really gonna darken up the edges to make this kind of look more of a night sky than just a big burst of color, okay? There we go. All right, now to do this, I'm gonna be very, very careful. When you go over to black, guys, black can get out of control really fast and it'll take over your entire piece. So you don't want that to happen. So just be very, very conservative with it, just a little bit at a time. And I'm literally just going to do my edges here and let that kind of bleed into the middle all on its own. I'm not going to brush this right into the very middle. I'm just touching the edges very carefully, okay? And because I have that nice dark purple, it's a really nice transition color with the black. So just very lightly in my darker spaces, giving this a little bit of contrast, all right? That is the goal. And the thing about contrast is it can get out of control very quickly. And then it's not so contrasty, it's just a big old mess. So I'm just creating little negative pockets of space. That is the goal. I've actually got some little spots in the middle that are white, and I'm just gonna go in and give some depth. That's all, just a little bit at a time. Doesn't take much, okay? Little tiny slivers of darkness. I'm barely touching my brush okay? Just the tip, very little. All right, now I'm quite happy with this. I feel like if I keep going, I might just kind of destroy it because I have a habit of going too far with everything. I want you guys to know that this is not the first time I've done this, okay? This is probably my millionth Nebula just for fun. So don't feel like you have to have this perfect the first time you try it. What I want you guys to do is I want you to take a sheet of paper and I want you to section it off, okay? And try this multiple times, or take a piece of paper and cut it up, all right? Make little ones about yay big, like note cards actually are fantastic to do this on. So grab some note cards and do multiple attempts of this. Be really cool looking. So here you have it. There's the nebula. You could see how the salt's kind of making the stars happen. That's about what I'm going for. I'm gonna let this dry and I will show you guys the end result. Okay, so I took a hairdryer to this, which works fantastically, by the way, guys. Hair dryers are really great if you're working with acrylic or tempera or watercolor. They will make this so much quicker. So what I'm gonna do is I am gonna add some stars to this. I'd like to see some more white going on. You can see that I have some where I didn't quite meet my paint completely, and that's really cool effect. I like that. And that the salt did do a little bit of cool stuff. There is some cool nebula effect going on in there, but I'd really like some more stars. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I just have a little bit of acrylic, and this is why you see dried up white in my watercolor palette. This is my little trick. Now you can get white, you can get watercolor in tubes, okay? But I like to use acrylic for this because it's cheaper to just do that instead of having multiple watercolors. Okay, anyway, so what I'm gonna do with this is I'm just gonna get a good brush for flicking, and the brush I told you guys not to use last time with the tough bristles is actually fantastic for what I'm about to do. So this one here, where I was flicking those bristles at you, those little bristles are gonna be great for what I wanna do. Now I'm gonna get some of this water here, and I should be switching my water out right now, especially because I'm using white, but I'm not using a whole lot of the water. I want more paint than water. And all I'm gonna do, a lot of people go do this one, okay, that's one way to go. What I don't really care for about this is that you end up with these kind of tails behind you. So I prefer this one. And you just flick your bristles and you get stars of all kinds. What I don't care for about that is you don't get to control where your stars go as well. So if you're really, really nitpicky about where you want your stars, I'm gonna show you what to do. So get yourself a nice soft brush, and I've got paint on my finger. Well, I'm just gonna wipe it off the side here. Get yourself a nice soft brush that has a really fine tip on it. Now you don't have to make this too small, okay? Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wet this brush and I'm going to take those bristles and I'm gonna twirl them up into a point, okay? And I'm just gonna keep doing that. All right, now that I have my point, I'm just gonna use that very tiny point, and it's almost needle thin to paint with. And when I dip it in my paint, I'm gonna get this kind of effect to it. And what this reminds me of is if you've ever baked and you whip cream, you get this effect called stiff peaks on your beaters. And it's when the whipped cream stands up on the end and it makes this point, okay? So that is kind of what I'm going for. And I'm just gonna take the very, very tip of that. And I'm not gonna just smush my brush down. No, I'm just gonna touch the very edge. Tiny, tiny, gentle touch. And this is gonna allow me to place stars where I want them. Now this is definitely the longer way to go. It's gonna take you a while, but what's neat about it is you can make your own constellations this way. So say you wanted to put Orion in here, I could maybe stick Orion over here, give him his belt. Right? So there's all kinds of neat things that you can do. Something for you to think about. You could write your name in the stars. Maybe there's a specific star that you like the North Star. Maybe could do a little dipper over here. So there. All right, and that is my nebula lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it wasn't too long, and I hope you found it helpful. So give me some feedback in the comments and let me know how this is helping you. All right, please check out my office hours on Monday. I switched them from 9 to 10 instead of 10 to 11. Hopefully that earlier time will help some of you guys be there. I know that there's quite a few other things going on that day. So let me know if you have trouble with that, and I can always schedule you for your own Zoom. All right, guys?